Scott Wilson.
Thank you all so much for having me. Just to be clear, I'm a writer, not a speaker. To begin, I want to take you back briefly to the 2008 presidential election, when many American voters felt a sense of historic excitement at the possibility of electing the nation's first African-American president. But there was something else going on, besides the once unimaginable integration of America's highest office, and it had to do with how then Senator Obama and his advisors communicated with the young, increasingly diverse block of voters that will likely decide elections for years to come. With only a few months left in the race, one senior Obama campaign official noted pointedly and publicly that his candidate would win without ever having spoken to the editorial board of the Washington Post, the embodiment of the inside the Beltway media that was becoming to the young Obamaites as obsolete as a telex machine. And of course, Obama did. With that perspective in mind, I'd like to speak tonight simply about what it is like to cover the White House in the age of President Obama, a uniquely savvy communicator who has at his disposal a wider array of tools to achieve a political goal that unites even Republicans and Democrats, avoiding as much as possible the national media. The president and his advisors deploy official websites, Twitter accounts, YouTube, Google Plus Hangouts, to speak directly to the American people, a not ignoble goal in itself. The result? A message often delivered free of the traditionally rigorous scrutiny applied by news organizations such as mine. I'll outline the broad scope of the change in the field of presidential and campaign communications in just the 4 years I have been observing it, and how those changes have been applied to governing the country in a way that increasingly leaves traditional media on the margins of the national political conversation. Perhaps the biggest challenge facing me tonight? To do this in a way that doesn't sound like the prolonged, unbecoming whine of a 46-year-old man who has spent more than half his life writing for a medium that represented the cutting edge of communication more than a century ago. That won't be easy at a personal level. But on a broad scale, why shouldn't the extremely low barriers to entry that the internet represents for startup journalism signal the next golden age of communication and accountability reporting? The opportunities are many more than when I started out. But here's what worries me. It is not so much the nature of journalism today as it is the increasing inability of the government, for our purposes tonight, the White House, to avoid the well-reported analysis and appraisal of the independent media, regardless of its brand or the manner in which it is delivered, whether by paper route or streaming video. Radio, then television, may have been the first great leaps in a president's ability to reach the public without speaking through a reporter. But there was network time to secure, radio stations to lobby in order for your news conference to be carried. No more. The internet is everyone's, and no president has embraced this ethos quite like Barack Obama. As an aging journalist from the so-called legacy media, my first alarmed reaction when I entered the headquarters in the early spring of 2012 was, wow, there's a whole national campaign underway that we know next to nothing about. And I was right about that. As one senior campaign official involved in the messaging and marketing side of the operations told me a month before Election Day, the conversation we have been having with voters is much different than the one that the national media have been having with voters. The not-so-veiled message? The people who matter most to us are not moved by what you, in the national media, find important. The legacy media no longer mattered, or at least not nearly to the degree that they once did in determining the trajectory of a national political contest. Much of the direct communication appealed to the young voters who comprise Obama's political base. How to make an incumbent president as appealing as the inspiring newcomer he was in 2008. By constant conversation with supporters through highly targeted email, campaign-produced video documentaries and testimonials, and a message to share with a friend through social media the argument to vote for Obama. Obama won the youth vote by a margin of 67 to 30% in 2012. And in a year of supposedly low enthusiasm, More young voters turned out to vote than did 4 years earlier by a significant amount. Obama became the first president to put his weekly quote-unquote radio address on YouTube. The official White House channel, as it is called, has nearly 300,000 subscribers. And so far, the live streams and videos it produces have been viewed nearly 121 million times. Obama has also conducted quote-unquote news conferences with the public entirely through Twitter, a challenge for an occasionally loquacious former law lecturer who once gave a 16-minute answer during a North Carolina town hall forum. Presidential interviews are one measure, and perhaps really the wrong measure, to judge accessibility and transparency. The president's time, as Mr. Carney reminded me in our talk, is by far the administration's most valuable commodity, and the one his advisors think most about how to use effectively, both in governing and in communicating with the country. So where is the value of the Washington Post and similar publications? The kind that engage in sometimes prolonged, often very expensive, news-gathering operations to cover the White House and the rest of the world. It is increasingly in the rigor and quality of that reporting, of speaking regularly to those 5 or 6 West Wing officials who really know what's going on, of collecting documents and data, and then analyzing as precisely and clearly as possible what it all adds up to for readers bombarded by bits and pieces of information delivered in tweets, iPhone video, and other new instruments on the internet. That is our niche. It is a tenuous one, and it grows even more so when the U.S. government, our franchise target at the Washington Post, is increasingly able to cover itself in a way that the administration's supporters in particular find even more satisfying than when it is done independently by others.
So given that evolution, do you see any sort of retro possibility for solid analytical reporting in the future, or are we lost?
First, I appreciate the optimism. Thank you. It's always good to hear. There are two things I'd say. I do think, and it's measurable on the internet, original, in-depth, long-form investigative reporting still does extremely well on the internet. Still gets a lot of viewers, a lot of hits. People stay on the site longer, which advertisers like. There's a business model to be built around just what you're describing, and there still is an appetite. Maybe more people our age, but also but certainly among young people too, and I think that they'll continue to want the kind of reporting that I like doing best and that you're describing. The threat is the short-term ability to basically to hold on.